Hint Studio that is based in Brussels, Belgium, with experiences working and conducting research on user behaviors, cleaner productions, environmental impact and sustainable innovations. So her expertise lies in the fuzzy front end of the new product development process. Hint Studio, that was developed by her, focuses on the exploring the juncture between design, sustainability, and cultural heritage, specifically in exploring values of the past as a resource in designing our sustainable future. So Dr. Sarah Suim is actually an enthusiast about distilling complex problems into stimulating design tasks, finding patterns from mundane everyday attractions, and eliciting insight from users' explicit and implicit habits to identify design opportunities. So she holds a doctorate in design for sustainability and Master of Science in Strategic Product Design from the Delft University of Technology, TU Delft in Netherlands. And she graduated from the Industrial Design from University Technology Malaysia. Okay, do not get confused. Dr. Sarah is actually a Malaysian and she's actually from Kedah. Which part in Kedah, Dr. Sarah?
Dulu saya membesar dekat Changlun. So really Kubang Basu for those who don't know the smaller town.
Right, so from Kedah to Brussels. Okay, right. So without further ado, okay, I will pass down the floor to Dr. Sarah to talk about the topic. Please welcome Dr. Sarah. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Salam for the nice introduction and making me realize I should simplify the sentences in in my intro as well. So first of all, I would say thank you for Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon to everybody. So today and now it's in morning here in Brussels. So first of all, I would like to thank you all of you to come to spend your time here to listen to our webinar series by UPM today. So I would, before I start, I would like to say my thank you first to Prof. Madia Zaki Jafar from the Architecture Department, who's actually reaching out to me about this opportunity, and also to Professor Madia, Dr. Hassan Ali, who is the HOD of the Design Department, and of course our moderator for today, Dr. Rosalam Echekmi, and yeah, of course, to the Faculty of Design and Architecture and UPM in general for offering me this platform to talk and share about my experience and knowledge when it comes to design for sustainability. So I will start my my slides now. So we'll see how this works. Okay, can you can see the, we'll try to go full screen now. So is that is it good, Dr. Salam? Can you see the screen well?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. Today's talk, as mentioned, is about systemic design thinking in design for sustainability. So before I start, I would like, I know Dr. Salam already gave some introduction about myself, but I will give still a little bit of a short introduction about myself. My name is Sarah Suib. I'm born in Perak and grew up in Kedah. And yeah, after I think I moved to the Netherlands 10 years ago for my master's, and in 2010, and now I've been living in Brussels for the last 4 years with my husband and my daughter, who's now 2 years old. So I finished my PhD in 2019. And after that, I started to do more freelance work for doing working in design and user experience projects. And after a while, after working and doing freelancing job for a year and a half, I started Hint Studio. It's really because the focus of I wanted to focus the work really on design, heritage, and sustainability, which is actually part of my core expertise and also part of the area of my PhD research as well. So a little bit about Hint Studio. Hint Studio really aims to support the development of products, service, and systems that are conscious, responsible, and sustainable by accelerating knowledge growth and capability. And of course, one of the core aspects of our studio is really we want to bring culture heritage into the discussion, because there's a lot of research that is conducted when it comes to culture heritage and design, but it was not like it is often not so clear where culture heritage state like our position within the design and the industry as well. It's always the difference between one part of culture heritage, one part of industry. And when you talk about sustainability, our culture heritage actually contains a lot of sustainable practices, contains a lot of sustainable knowledge, which we often put it behind, like we often didn't really care enough about it, because it wasn't the scientific research, but it's more from coming from our traditional living. And yeah, so this is one of the like one of my motivation when I started this this studio. And I'm also part of Green Design Malaysia. If some of you are part of the Facebook group Green Design Malaysia, together with Harith from the Green Carpenter, Ikang Oi, who's also a designer in Malaysia and also now a lecturer, and Asri, who's also I think he worked he's part of the design agency in Malaysia as well. So I think these two channels has really offer opportunity for me to actually connect to designers and sustainable thinkers in Malaysia. So I'm really happy with that. And with the COVID, because there's although there's a lot of bad things that happen, at least one of the or at least for me, one of the nice thing was it offered a platform to share and make it easier for me to share my work in Malaysia digitally. So I'm really happy to have the chance today to talk about my experience in systemic design thinking in design for sustainability. Yes. So this, although this topic today sounded quite technical, but I'm not going to go really into the scientific idea behind systemic design, but I plan to take more personal approach in this presentation, because I really wanted to share how my journey in doing design for sustainability led me to the awareness and the realization of the importance of systemic design thinking in designing for sustainability. So just to go a little bit, and to go a little bit further into the topic. So what is design for sustainability? We often hear this like it's a lot of things, but one of the things, of course, we wanted to create a better world, a better future for everybody. But yeah, it's the topic itself. It's so big now, it's so complex, but it's also at the same time abstract. You can say, it can be for well-being, it's for our health, it's for design, it's for social impact, it's about quality, it's about economic prosperity. We are thinking about the environment, we are thinking about society, and in the end of the day, we are also looking for peace and prosperity for everybody. But it is always all these positive words that come into the like come into mind when we think about design for sustainability. But yes, and these are the different themes that have been explored. And of course, if you are following the Brundtland definition of sustainability, it is also or mainly about design with the next generation in mind. So for the past 70, like I think in the 70s, when the plastic started to the plastic started to be part of our industry, there's a lot of development that's happened, but this development never really we are excited about the future. We are excited about our capability, a human capability to actually create, to actually generate, produce a lot of different items. We have a lot of imagination of how the future will be, but we never really realized that the earth has a finite resources. It's not, at some point we need to deal with the waste that we created. At some point we're going to run out of resources. So design for sustainability is really about designing with the next generation in mind. So you don't just design for the user, we also design for the next cycle of life of the product, and also to think of what is the impact of this particular product, not just with us, not just with our generation, but also for the next generation. And that's actually what have been the current issue about climate change and the climate crisis that we have right now. So all this like all these principles and requirements are actually really challenging, especially when you talk about, I wanted to design a product within this context. And to be honest, these challenges are only becoming more complex each time we start learning about it. Even for me, each time we start with a project, we realize there are more and more elements that we need to take into consideration, and it is very it is actually a really nice challenge, but at the same time we need to somehow find a way to manage these challenges. So before I start, I would say I would share this why do I think this the challenges are becoming more complex. I will share a little bit about my own experience when it comes to the design for sustainability. So I started really in 2009 while I was working in a local playground company in Malaysia. I started to explore sustainable material, but mainly for the construction, for the developers, because they are requesting like a sustainable element in our design, and I started to learn about like sustainable material. And then from that, I started to be interested in the subject, and in 2010 I did my master in strategic product design, and this is where I learned about design for sustainability group in Delft University of Technology. So, and I was doing my master. I did most of my projects with the group, because you can choose the different types of projects that you wanted to do throughout your master. So I always find an opportunity to actually work for this group. And also after I finished my master, I applied to start it. I requested and also submit my application to continue my PhD in the group. So while I was here, so there are like 3 aspects of activities throughout throughout my time in DFS. So first is really about conducting research, either for the MSc or the PhD. And at the same time, DFS is really about the research is really project oriented. So we often go out and work as a consultant in the industry, and then we bring in the content, and those those data that we collected become part of our research. Become part of our research will part of our research as well. So and we work as a consultant in an industry based on the project. So it's not just going into going to industry to collect data for my PhD or my master, but really to work in a design project to finish complete the design either with a company or with an organization. And the same thing applies for the students as well. So I was also the coach for design students for their masters for their master project. So in this stage, I was more of managing the students and like really supervising the project. And yeah, so these are the different facets of work that I did during my time in DFS, and I've learned not just from the projects that I did, but also the projects that other colleagues work on as well, and also what the students, the project that the student took on during their time. And when you talk about like, okay, what kind of project we're doing, and when we talk about designing for sustainability, it started really at the start of the process. Like we need to know about the material origins and the procurement, like how does this, like, for example, I was working a lot in Vietnam, so the main material that I started to really become more adept with is bamboo. So we really, for example, need to know where the bamboo comes from. Is it from the forest or is it from agricultural land? And if it's from agricultural land, how does it being like, yeah, how does the farming or how does this the plant or like they're managing this? Is it in a sustainable way? And once you kind of understand where this system, where this factors coming on, we also start to know about the workers, like their working conditions, their daily wages. So we really spend time to get to know the system. We need to know where is the company, like, because in Vietnam it's more social manufacturing process, so it's actually a combination of factory and villages that is kind of having a symbiosis with each other. So we learned that, yeah, not everybody work in a factory. There are people who work at home. There are people who are not directly hired by the company, but they are actually the one that provide values to the company. So there's like all this different interaction and connection that is not visible if you're just looking or just talking to the company, because most of the time for them this is normal. So I these people work in many things for me, and when I interview them, and when you actually go to the field, and you can actually see the different things that pop up in your visit. And of course, this company is not the intention to kind of hide facts from us, but sometimes the facts is just not normal for them. They don't think it's important enough to share it with the reason, and like we really that everybody in my everybody in this region is doing this, like, and there's no point of sharing this information. So these are like once we understand the workers, we understand the system, we can kind of start to. So this is actually really in the fuzzy front end of the design process. This is before we have the design of what do I want to produce or what do I want to develop with the stakeholders involved in the project, for example. And also understanding the process, making the stakeholders and the organizations and challenges allow us to really understand why like how to implement sustainability in the system. Like, is it important for them to have a good working condition, or is it really more important to have more wages? So sometimes it's quite clear, like it's also like when you actually start to kind of bring all this information together, that not everybody think having high wage is important. Or some of them really appreciate having the time for themselves to do the work, the time and the space to actually meet and communicate with people. So it's like one I would like to share like one story with like a friend who was working in India, and she was developing a new products in the villages, and she realized that the villages really, the moment when you work in this craft village, they have to work at home, and they have to actually walk really far to go to the center to work. So she designed a machine that enabled them to work at home. But the problem was these women actually they want for them going to the work every day as their chance to leave the home and be with their friends. If they are at home, they have to do all this housework, and they have to be responsible for their family, and they have to take care of the family. And actually, these women are not really happy with this situation. They want it to be like for them going out for work is kind of freedom that they like to have. So this is like and as an outsider to actually really understand this motivation, this latent thing that people don't say it out loud, but it's actually quite important for their well-being. It's also part of what we have to do when you talk about like I'm building this, I'm developing this product for this user. like sometimes the things that they need and the things that they wish for and the things that they feel comfortable with not but doesn't dare to actually say it out loud. So it's also quite important. This is when you actually say and build a bit of relationship with the stakeholders, then you kind of get to know them. Sorry, can you hear? Can you hear me now?
Can hear.
Sorry, I was. Just now I saw somebody say like they can't hear me.
We can hear you clearly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so this is like one like part of the how to say the work that you need to do before we actually start the design process. And of course during this time we start to observe that there's any time we were involved and there's actually a very complex situation when you have people working in different working conditions. So sometimes child is just there at home where all the work is. And these are the things that we need to kind of look at and finalize. Just because the child is doing the work, is it necessary child labor, and to really be open and to learn from the community themselves what are they doing without giving any I would say without being too judgmental before you actually enter and understand the culture and the things. So yeah, once we have this kind of understanding of how things move and how things are connected, I started to look at the design within the design phase, like what are the brief for this project, and then we either improve current products or we create a better design, we develop new collections or we increase current value offering. So this can be we don't do any design but really focus on communication marketing. So for example, one of the that I work a lot on is also like building sustainable stories for the company. So a lot of companies, at least the one that I work in Vietnam, they already have plenty of sustainable practices within the system. They already do that. They never really put on like highlight this as something sustainable because for them this is how we do things every day. Like we always use water to treat our bamboo, for example. And we always work with these villages who are cultivating bamboo for years. But and this village is actually part of a sustainability program by other states. So these are like the different connections that we started to make to actually support this company. So they have different practices and we have a different understanding what sustainability practices and then this kind of meet and we find ways to actually build this value together. And this is when I realized that sometimes it's just like just because you're a designer doesn't mean that you have to design your product. You really first you need to understand what is the situation, what is the issue and what is the problem, and this is part of I think if a lot of you here are well aware of like design for design thinking approach, where you really look at problems, you really try to understand who are involved in it and then try to ideate come up with like solutions to improve the current situation. So this is I think part of what we are doing at this phase to really see pinpoint, like highlight our pain points and then try to build upon it. So and of course, some companies wanted to create new design, want to explore new market, for example. So these are the conversation I have. Companies needs to really understand your needs and then offer a strategy solution that can actually lead to this requirement and of course using sustainability as our guiding principle. So and part of my PhD research is part of my PhD research is really to explore is there any aspects of plantation that is considered sustainable about this process. So there are some practices that have been like it's just like that have been the practice, and the villages, for example, they already inherit these practices from generations of earlier ancestors, and for them, that's how we do things normally. And for me, it's like, no, but this is also very sustainable. We should really use this out. Because when I was in Vietnam, a lot of, because this is part of an EU grant project also as well, they come in as and they were the experts, so tell me what to do. But actually we are the expert when it comes to this material. We are the expert when it comes to this production processes, and try to understand this and bring out what are the valuable elements of the system, the valuable element of the process that we are doing first before we even suggest anything new. So this is basically to build on our current offering. So we don't just come in and say like you this is sustainable, but it's first understanding the system, listening to the people, and understanding the values that we're offering, and then we move forward together. So that's part of that's part of my first, I would say, part of experience in designing for sustainability. And this is like maybe 6 years ago, or maybe more, 6 years probably. So during this time, like the starting point is really about sustainable design and production. There's a lot of grants, there's a lot of effort that were put into designing for sustainability, using for cleaner productions. But then if you go and talk to companies, for them to be part of the project is relies on the grants and funding that is available for this project. So when I talk to them, I would continue doing this, or so more about the sustainability of our offerings, of the solutions, and I see a lot of them say like we need to think about stuff like first before we can think about the world, which is true because they are so as SMEs, they are working. This is part of their living, and this is really we have to be realistic as well to kind of ensure how can this design and production process that is sustainable can run on its own, and this is happening as well. So within these activities that we're doing in the industry, there's a lot of papers, there's a lot of research that's happening that is starting to focus on sustainable consumption. So this is so this is the experience that I see, like how things move from the design production towards consumption, and this is like sustainable consumption that of living started to take that center stage and to be part of like what we're working on, like instead of just we don't no longer look at designing and using but we also look at consumers. How they're living, what are their habits, and just more on the user research. I try to understand consumer behavior. How do people like decide what to buy? Is there any sustainable are they interested in sustainable offerings, for example? And for the past, I think years, it seems like very high increase of sustainability activities, the same in Malaysia as well. And just recently, I went to a webinar by Factory Belgium, so it's quite recent information that of course the international culture has its changing, and I think this translates to like other Malaysia as well. Like that you have consumers that start to be aware of the climate crisis that we're facing, like and how we can actually improve. How they can change their habits, or they actually want to change their habits for many reasons, of course. And the research that are done, there's like there are 40% of people willing to purchase trade fair or organic products. So this is based on general population of 32,200 people. So that's the sample size for this research, and more than 50% purchase products that are sustainable. And this consumer also have some demands from the industry. So from the industry, they want to know if the human rights of people are being respected throughout the production process. So this is where understanding where you come from, or understanding how to work, make create a value in bringing out the sustainable stories to the consumers, because not consumer and they wanted to know about this. It's and if you didn't do anything, then just to the next competitors when share the stories and you want to know your origins as well. So this is part of like what I mentioned earlier, like some companies pay enough attention to this, of course, because of cost. There are also a lot of different challenges when you want to actually down your origins of your ingredients because of our global supply chains but regardless of these difficulties, there's the dynamic that's actually a pull from consumer side, and the consumer also start to I want the government to make it easier for them to purchase sustainable food and goods. So and this is actually really both coming from the grassroots bottom and coming from the top. So the grassroots movement of design for sustainability, climate change, to actually really think about climate, come both from the ground and also from the top policymakers as well. And this is in Europe, and also in Southeast Asia. And when I was working in Vietnam, there's a lot of also influence from the state itself to actually support the company that is going into this route. So for me, at least from my research, I started to look at various at least there are three big groups that are leading to accept sustainable products. So they are the consumers. So these that do market are very open to sustainability, and I think luxury assets are losing their value. So people start to want to have something conscious and sustainable. And they have followed as well. So these brands, like if you see all like big brands or big companies like P&G, here all Volkswagen, the advertisement here in Europe is always about what are the sustainability steps that they are taking to improve either the perception, either the way we consumers is always revolved around this. And also there's a research that of course younger generation are also more open and more willing, and also more aware of the importance of sustainability in living and also in the principle of way of their lives. And these are the two groups of sectors that from my experience are starting to become already more conscious and sustainable, especially in the way they eat, living, mobility, of their travel, and of their overall lifestyle. So these are so you have first coming out the production side, and then coming down to the consumer and the market side of things that development really, at least my experience happened for the past 10 years while I was working in this field. And as more sustainable oriented products and services is still more established, we also have more issues and problems. So these are the issues that we design without really thinking about the system. So I think one of the example I can really share is that sort of science based to a 10 country. So I think Malaysia faces this parallel. These are the issues that faced by Western countries that started the recycling project. They wanted to use recycle, and the user, the consumer recycle, that the citizens recycle as stated or and then however the system doesn't really bring the whole cycle, doesn't really bring doesn't really offer a good solution. So the solution that we export is the next country, our problem, we can't part. So these are one of the reasons why you have goods like you build a service, a system around recycling, but you don't really think of the whole system. You only think of after this is out of my border, this is no longer our, like we just need to take this out of our border and it's no longer our problem. And as of course these issues was like, yeah, it become more prominent when China stopped taking any imported waste from any country, and they have to find other countries to accept this. And this is of course and not like unacceptable in terms of when you think about developing and designing for sustainability, because you have to think of the whole system. Because if you have some bottleneck, this is where we need to first dig in, understand the problem, and then find a good solution, and offer a solution to such an issue. And another issue that come to mind when I think about like all these different design products that come, like sustainable products that can be problematic, but in the eyes of a consumer is like I'm doing my part. So it's like sometimes the consumer already have the intention, but then the system behind it doesn't allow this intention to materialize. So there's like, for example, there's like a common story about coffee mugs, coffee cups. So we think like all coffee cups, they are biodegradable because it's written there it's sustainable. Not necessarily, because you really have to look at the local capacity to recycle. Sorry. So at some point there are some areas, some events that we work with. They wanted to use they wanted to use sustainable cups for their projects, for their events, and over time you only realize that in that area they have no recycling plant for this specific material, even though it is supposed to be recyclable. It is it can be recycled, but not in the area. So you have to actually also look at the local stakeholders to really understand how the system works. And this is why this is why back to the point that I'm trying to highlight, like design for sustainability is getting more complex. At least that's how I experience it. And it has always been complex, but I started to actually be really aware of the importance of highlighting the complexity behind such projects, because it's more than the design process, it's more than the production processes, it's more than being responsible in our consumption. So, but really, how do we deal with this, and this interconnected complexity need to be managed systematically? At least this is how I think we need to look at it. We need to find ways to systematically obviously approach this project, and this is where systemic design thinking come into being. So I will try to finish this in 10 minutes, I hope. Yeah, but we did start a bit later, so I will take another 10 minutes before I finish my presentation. Hello, is there any question?
Not check. We don't have any questions. You can proceed.
Okay.
We will have the Q&A session after your.
Okay. Yes. So systemic design thinking. So this is where so part of the work that I shared earlier, that's already involved in understanding the system, understanding the stakeholders, but really having a method or having an approach that has been scientifically written makes me understand, or makes me become more aware of how I can do this, how I can improve, we can do this better. So systemic design thinking is actually a combination of system thinkings and design thinking. So, for those who are new in system thinking is really about understanding the network of stakeholders that are connected to each other, knowing their relationships and their interactions, whereas design thinking is really about it's really about working on problem, like working within the problem space. So finding solution in a defining your problem space and then finding a solutions to improve the current state of things. And yeah, so systemic design thinking is really enabling you to observe the relationships and to understand that they are different relationships when you come to stakeholders. So you don't necessarily have a direct interaction, but you are somewhat connected to each other. So you might be connected to a company that is selling a product, for example, like but that is your direct relationship. But then you also, if you map everything, we may have a connection with the suppliers and the growers, the weavers in different countries, like in India and Vietnam. So this is like understanding this relationship, mapping out the whole connection, offer a really like a foundation of understanding of how we can improve the state without really going into problems. Because of course, if you look at every relationships, every interactions, even in each stakeholders, everybody have their problems, like everybody have issues to solve. But if you solve one issue without really taking into consideration how those how your solution impact stakeholders that are either directly or indirectly involved in the whole system, then we end up with, for example, the case of the coffee cup earlier, where you solve one problem, but then you create another problem on the other, like you create a new problem. So these are like, of course, like the idea is not really to not have any problem, but really to make us to really, as a designer, to put us a step ahead of what it means to design for a better future. And this approach is non-linear and is a bit innovative in a way that it doesn't have a specific like how you will solve the problem, but it's really help you to frame all the different problems and then find a and help you to build a strategy on how you want to deal or how you want to find a solution. It doesn't necessarily mean one solution. So that's also the thing with design thinking, because it's really coming from the design field, designerly way of working, that it's usually quite uh, possible that you are looking at one kind of solution, but when you look at a systemic design thinking, you will see all these different solutions that are possible, and it doesn't necessarily just means a product. It can be a product, a service, a system, even a policy that need to change to improve the situation. So these may involve more stakeholders, and they are bringing and I learned about this approach while I was a resident in residence academic in Naman. So Naman is actually a human-centered design agency based in Brussels, and they are one of the pioneer in systemic design toolkit. So you can actually find this toolkit online and kind of download if you're interested to learn more about this. And this is actually the work that they done in systemic design toolkit. So this the methodology that they developed for this approach consists of 7 steps. So the first step is really like framing the system, so understanding the system. So what is the area of that the system that we want to understand, and really listen to the system. So you can see from the figures that you have one side that is coming, like one part that includes steps from system thinkings, and the other side the steps that coming from design thinking. So it's really about listening to understand, like what we did earlier, to the motivation of people, their challenges, their dreams, what is the problems, and what is the connection that they have with other stakeholders. And the third step is really to understand the system. So when you listen, then you start to understand without having a judgment from your own like understanding. So you really understand the system based on what you listen from, like based on the data that you have. And then you go back to design thinking where you define the desired future. So this is where for designer is really about the design brief to really understand what are we doing here and how we're going to improve this situation. And we go back to the system thinkings where you explore the possibility space. So this space can be different. Like this is where I think when you think about system thinkings, it's really thinking about the space to improve the system, and it can be and it can be very broad. And then once you have the possibility space, you start to design the intervention model. So it's like a strategy to how we can make this work, and then fostering the transition. So there's like a different aspect of this, especially in fostering transition, because you're talking about changing a system. So when you change the system, we need to be aware of the transition phase. It can be 6 months, it can be 4 years before you actually reach to where you wanted to be, because you understand like the different needs and different what is important for each stakeholders, and then you try to kind of nurture this change slowly without pushing, like it doesn't happen overnight. You don't change everything overnight, so it's always have this transition period, because if you learn about system, it's really like you try not to create a shock in the system, because then you will have an adverse effect. So you try to really build and nurture the transition within the system. So this is at least part of what I learned from Naman. But of course, you can contact them and like check them out to really understand, like to get more information about this approach. And yeah, so within systemic design thinking, of course, you have a collaborative. How to do it is really about collaborative co-creation session among stakeholders. So what you do is you bring everybody in. So it's not necessarily in one go, but you bring everybody in the system and you co-create together. So it's not just doing research among the stakeholders, but really they themselves are part of the solution. We brainstorm and we co-create the solution, finding like exploring each other. So it's like you usually have a lot of stakeholders. They are more often than not really like have their own needs and have their own wishes, and these are important for them. But then once you bring everybody in together, well, now not necessarily in a room, but more in like in a session, when people start to talk to each other, you start to learn like, yes, I have my wishes, I have my dreams as well. Like just because you are you are the policymakers doesn't mean that everything you do is wrong and you're trying to make my life hard as a user. So this collaborative co-creation session really bring out like allow people to understand each other, and kind of we started to really think of, okay, how do we improve the situation, not just for myself, but also for the other people involved in the session. And of course, this what I like, at least my personal view, is like this approach make the system, the stakeholders, and their interaction tangible, because you really build the whole interaction, map them out, and it become tangible, that you realize, I'm actually connected to this group of people more than I think of. Like they offer so many different value in my way of living that I never really think about. So these are when you build something, like, yeah, it's really about building something together. But of course there are different ways of how people approach this method. So some have a co-creation session, and some also just focus on understanding the stakeholders without really bringing a lot of them into the decision making process. So yeah, so it's still uh, although the method is quite clear, but how, as the designer, for example, to take this in, it's really up to your own creative needs. And yeah, it's quite often that we learn about design tools and then we started to really change or tweak them to meet to our needs. So yeah, I'm almost at the end of my presentation. So why is this vital in design for sustainability? It's just so why is systemic design thinking is useful when you talk about design for sustainability? And yeah, of course, like what I've shared earlier, it addressed the complexity and challenges when we wanted to think about sustainability, because sustainability is not just about the user. It started like it's about the individual, it's about the community, the society, our environment, and of course also our human-made environment as well. So it's not just the natural environment that we're talking about. We also need to think about the artificial environment that we have, both physical and digital. And yeah, so it's about really the well-being of the people, the well-being of the society, the well-being of the planet in general. And one of the key points why I bring this up is because I think it's also support the like offer a systematic transformation towards circular economy. So these are like the current how to say the current trend we say trend in sustainability sphere, like you start to look more on circular economy because it's really about designing waste and pollution out from the system. We keep products and material in loops so it stays longer with us, or we make sure that it's biodegradable if it's not in the loop, and it's mainly about revitalizing and safeguarding the natural environment. So it's really to prepare or like to really reduce the impact of climate change. And a lot of work have been done in circular economy, and I believe that if we want to if we want to develop a circular system, of course we need to kind of find ways to understand the system, and systemic design thinking offer or can support such an effort. So yes, this is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time. And I think now we have still half an hour um, for the discussion and Q&A. And I pass it back to Dr. Salam. Thank you.
Half an hour or more. Just can't wait. But thank you so much, Dr. Saraswati, for the very wonderful, insightful, interesting presentation. Right. So, okay, I forgot to mention that, okay, for those of you who are currently watching, if you want to apply for the e-certification, e-certificate, you can actually go to the chat and then you can go to the link for the registration form and e-certificate, right? So you can go to check on the link from the chat room, right? Okay, I have a list of questions myself to ask Dr. Sarah, but for
Yeah.
the audience, okay, if you have any question, you can actually type in the chat room, or you can always turn on your mic and turn on your camera. You can ask yourself. So we're gonna wait for the questions to be included. Okay, okay. There are some of my friends also from the university, Dr. Jamil, Dr. Johan, right? Okay, so that we are all, we can see that we have many sustainable design enthusiasts among the audience as well, right? Okay, okay, I have questions regarding the methods that you somehow introduced, okay, about this
Mhm.
approach. But before that, maybe just a little bit on the sustainable design approach itself, because when we talk about the sustainable design, it relates to the green design, eco design, and it has become like a compulsory keyword when we talk about the function of design towards the environment we live in, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's become something that we must actually include in our everyday design decision. So in Malaysia, we can always see the positive exposure, exploration, and adoption of sustainable design into the major design decision and application. And it's actually a very good progress and a good growth. So
Yeah.
as a practitioner, okay, as a practitioner, it's very good to hear it from you that because you have the knowledge and the sustainable design approach, and then you're running your own studio that I think revolve around that area as well. So sustainable design scenario in Malaysia, how is it different from what you can see in Europe? Maybe in particular in Belgium or some part of the Europe. So what do you think that is lacking here, and what do you think we can somehow improve? Basically about
I
the comparison.
Yeah, I think thank you for the question. I think that's like one big difference that I see here in Europe is there's a lot of policy coming from the EU Commission, not necessarily from the Belgium government, but really from the EU side, like the EU Commission, because there's a lot of fundings, there's a lot of grants, especially now they have the new Bauhaus movement. So it's really about designing sustainable products. There's a lot of funding going in the EU green plan. So I think at least here when I was like working, even when I started working, like the work, it is all mainly partly influenced by the policymakers from the EU Commissions that is offering this field, because like when you talk about sustainable innovations, you really also it helps like any new innovations to have a support system. So even if you look at startup, you have sandbox, you have like incubators to really support new innovation to come into. So it's really before you can cycle, before the system can run on its own, there's a lot of support either from the government or the investors. And this is what I see here in Europe. I have to say, like frankly, a lot of the green, the sustainable innovation are influenced by the policymakers themselves. And this is actually when I started to look in Malaysia, and I was also working in Vietnam. So Vietnam and the Philippines are two of the countries that I think started in Southeast Asia that has a sustainability effort, that like started to have sustainability effort within their policy, within their programs. And I can see this two times. Like I think when I was doing I visit a lot of trade fairs, mainly Ambiente and Tendance Lifestyle in Germany. And I often go to all these different booths by the countries, and you can see Vietnam and Philippines really start to share with the audience, like their marketing plan includes sustainability in the stories. Whereas I think in Malaysia, what is lacking is really the top up, the policy makers. Like I think when I was doing some research, I started to look at my SMEs, and they have all the different lists of support that they offer to local SMEs, and sustainability actually is the last one. And yeah, so but if you look on the grassroots movement, for example, like in Malaysia, you can see like I was like, when that's also one of the things when I started to work together in Green Design Malaysia, I started to see there's so many groups, there's so many initiatives in the grassroots level that is focusing on all the different aspects of sustainability, be it like agriculture, like you have people who started their own farming way of farming at home, or farming sustainably, like how to do permaculture. And you have companies that are looking at sustainable designs. You have a lot of also like academics who share these informations with the audience, with the public. So there are a lot of works that is happening across the board, but I would say one main point that is lacking is coming from the top. Yeah, so that's probably what I can like, yeah, that's the observation that I have.
Yeah.
Feel free to disagree, or if you think otherwise, because it's really like I really, it's really based on my experience of doing of learning from others as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for the first question. Okay. I think we have one more questions from the audience here. Okay. From Adib Ahmad Hazim. So Adib, you want to ask the question by yourself, or I can read it for you? Or before that, we have a question from Dr. Zaki. Is it Dr. Zaki?
Hello, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hello, Dr. Zaki.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very
Okay.
well.
I'm in the middle of another meeting, but I'm listening to your talk more than there was just a discussion. So I'm just wondering, I'm glad that you mentioned the word understanding dreams, stories. Okay. To me, these are the clues that the new education system should pick up on, because we are so used to, when we try to get information of the parameters of the project, we often engage on the cognitive aspect, surveys, observation, empirical evidence. But the role of understanding sentiments, understanding stories, understanding dreams. It's a totally different kind of skills altogether. It involves the engagement of different faculties of a human. So I think there is a clue into what direction the new design curriculum should go to. Employing, invoking all these senses. Trying to it's a systemic design. It's about a very complicated stories. Every story is different from one another. So the skills of understanding a story, it varies from one story to another. So what do you think of the pedagogical or epistemological approach in design courses when we talk about this systemic thinking and circular design?
Okay, thank you for the question. That's a really interesting one. Definitely, when you talk about the pedagogical approach to this, if you search for contextualization, so this is actually an area of research where in TU Delft is part of the programs. It's part of the course that we have to take to really to contextualize the user. So it's mainly on studying the user, but of course, part of understanding the user or the system is to put in context or to bring their context into the as the focus point. So there's this area of research that is really focusing on the toolkits that designers can use to actually explore this. So there's like I'm sorry if I can't remember it well, but there's like 3 levels of way of understanding the user. The first level is really asking them questions. So asking about like, okay, what do you do today? How do you how do you shave, for example? And then to really observe and see what their action is, because we as a user, I'm not just talking about the other people, but of course for myself, we have a certain idea of ourselves, but also a certain reality of us. So what you say when you say about interview is really about understanding the surface, is really sharing getting the information of what people think they are. But then when you started to really, for example, observe their way of living, and you realize that, yeah, they believe that they are this way, but they are also a little bit more like, how to say, open to things, are more strict. And they like, for example, if somebody think that I'm a very open person, but then when you actually listen and see how they interact to each other, and then you realize, yeah, she is open, but she's actually a little bit more introvert or something. So this is like the observation part and also the latent part. So the latent part is really about the values that we have in us that we don't really necessarily realize ourselves. So this is where, like, of course, like when you mentioned that, yeah, understanding what people dreams, like what do you want in your life in the future, really brings better understanding of the person, of like, yeah, it's a little bit of an anthropological approach as well. So there's this part of design research that is adopting different I think that's also quite fun about also complex about design research is really there's a lot of adoption from other fields. And of course, in terms of contextualizing, understanding the user, we took a lot of skills or methods from the anthropological research. So anthropologists, but they are very much into into really look at the person and understanding a group of a community, for example. And that's actually quite interesting, where design actually offer a leverage for anthropological studies, because humanity, like if you search for design for anthropology, there is also a big body of research that have been written about this, where designers leverage on the knowledge of anthropology, because anthropology has a really good way of understanding humans, and of course they are the humanities for longer than the design world is, but we leverage on the knowledge. And for the anthropological side of humanity side of studies, they have been struggling, of course, over time. I think it's quite common where when you cut costs and you like universities, they start to receive less funding and they need to find funding themselves. And of course, design, engineering, have a better chance of getting funding from the industry because we can actually offer a direct solutions or direct offering. And then the humanities actually have it's harder, it's more abstract in a way, and bridging anthropological and design to the industry, and design is actually a good one of the area that bridge knowledge from the anthropological studies into the industry. So really it's about understanding the user, leveraging on the knowledge that have been established with the anthropological side. And there's actually a few movements of anthropologists themselves that started to become user researcher. They started to use their knowledge and skills and expertise to actually understand the market. So their approach is a bit more human than our scientific approach. So this is, and I see this approach or this kind of epistemology of knowledge of growing of the interconnectedness of things where you look at like as a designer you look at technology, but you also look at the society, and you use all this and you use a lot of different lenses to actually achieve this. And I feel like as a design, like coming from a design field myself, there's a lot of opportunities that design group or design community can leverage through like being the middle, like being the connectors to different part of either to the different part of our like how to say of the knowledge field, like and also connected and also connecting this body of knowledge to the industry as well. So I hope I give and feel free to check with me of all these terms. I can like share with you later of the different terms and terminologies that is actually more scientific for further exploration.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. That's very interesting explanation of the aspect of the study. Thank you very much.
Yeah, most welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Zaki. Do you have any further questions, Dr. Zaki?
Now let's the others ask their question.
Right. We have one question from the audience, but before that, I'm going to ask. This is maybe related to what Dr. Zaki has mentioned just now. The question. This is regarding the methods that you somehow introduced. Okay. It is very interesting to see how you came into introducing the sort of innovative approach of practicing the research, practicing or researching design, which is the systematic design thinking system, which is the combination of system thinking and design thinking.
Yeah.
So you have talked about it in general, about the concept and how it can be used, etc. But I think it would be great if you can dig in deeper and further discuss about this method or approach, like the steps and techniques. And secondly, the following questions to that is, there are some similarities between the systematic design thinking system and the existing design thinking, because of course, obviously it is derived from the approach, right? It's derived from the design thinking approach. But precisely, how is it different from design thinking or other co-creation or participatory design, and how is it actually complementing and supporting the design in the works?
I will first touch on the last, the second question is about how design thinking and system thinking differ or complement each other. I think on my view, it's really about complementing each other, because so what from my experience, like what is the difference between first looking at the system or starting with like a design thinking structure. So design thinking in a nutshell is really about a process of tackling ill-structured or complex problems. So usually we have an issue, then we tackle this issue as how I've been working on in my design work as well. So first you understand the users, you try to understand all the different stakeholders in the system. So partly why I was interested in systemic design approach is really because it explained a lot of things that is connected to what I've already did. So a lot of actually quite like a lot of research or scientific theories that when we look at it, if you can translate it back to your practice, then that theory is really valid. Like, you know, and that's what happened when I started to to realize this, because for design thinking, it's really about we understand the problem space. So basically, we kind of build, this is the problem space of building a coffee, like building a coffee machine, for example. This is the design space that I have. Like, okay, I want to improve the experience of coffee, like improving the coffee experience, for example. And then from that, you start to look at not just the machine, but really to understand why people drink coffee. So that's the user, and how do they drink coffee. So and you start to build from there all these different element. And of course, once I start with the problem, then the system sort of expand according to the time and the time or space that I have for that particular project. And of course, more often than not, you started to kind of, okay, I think I've kind of have all these people who are directly involved in the problem space, and then I map them. But then when you talk about the systemic design, like system thinking, is really look at the whole system. So not just the coffee, not just like until like where I gain my coffee, or how this coffee is being planted, where the seeds come from, what are the relationship between all these stakeholders. They are not directly involved in the design per se, in the process, in the problem space, but they are more in the periphery of this problem space. And this is where I think with system thinking, what is difficult and also interesting is really to frame your system. How does the system work? And from my experience, when I was in Amman, they are looking at the mobility, improving the mobility of public transport in Brussels. So that's one of the sessions that was conducted while I was there. And yeah, so it's really not really about we want to improve the tram system. So it's really just to understand the mobility of these people in the city. So you have all these different connections, and then you start to see, okay, what we can do here. So it's a little bit more open-ended in terms of the solution doesn't necessarily have to be a design solution. So when I say design solution, it can be the system, the services, or the product. So it's quite like a typical product service system range. But it's really to just see, sometimes maybe you just need to change the connection, the relationship between them, and then you already improve the system. So it's bringing you out a little bit, like, to be honest, for myself, out of my comfort zone, because I'm always like, okay, if you start with design thinking, you always think of solution, but you start with system, it's really about understanding, and then the solution is actually doesn't necessarily, if you look at the system, it's really about understanding the system. There's not necessarily have to be a solution. It doesn't need to have a product or a service or system behind it. But of course, when you talk about system design thinking, this is where I find it's important in designing for sustainability, where you already, like as a designer, need to know all these different stakeholders that is involved in the whole process, because this is the requirement of designing for sustainability. You need to know all this, to share these stories to either from the consumer side, or to the people, to the producers, or to the to the supply chain, to the distributor. So as a designer, there are more things that need to be understood and kind of make tangible. And I find, like, over time, I realized this is what I've been doing, and systemic thinking and systemic design thinking really offer the support to actually do this more systematically, more methodologically, not just from my own way of thinking, because this is actually, I think, what is nice about design research is understanding what designers have been doing and then translating them in a more scientific way so others can follow it as well. So yeah, that's my that's so that's the first part. I think it's really complementing each other.
Yeah, I think you have actually answered the question. So, but just an additional to what I just asked just now, is it? So the approach, the systematic design thinking, does it applicable to any other design area, or it is designed specifically for the sustainable design approach? Or I know that this approach has been somehow developed throughout your research that is revolved around the sustainable design, right? But does it actually exclusively be applicable for that specific area, or it can be used for what other applications?
So first to add is systemic design approach is really also part of the learning curve that I have throughout my design for sustain, like doing like my field of experience really on design for sustainability. And then when I was working in Amman, that I realized that the thing that I've been like dealing with all this while designing for sustainability can be supported by using this approach. And this is why I'm sharing this today, not because systemic design approach is really my expertise, because my like I would say my field of expertise is really designing sustainability with a focus on cultural heritage. But why I choose to share this today is I really feel that it is a support, it can help designers who are planning to work on design for sustainability, but of course not necessarily this, because this is just from my experience. But systemic design thinking on its own, it's really about a method to tackle complex issues. So you can think of a lot of things now, like the challenges that we face, for example, in building the economy post COVID. What are the different stakeholders in the whole system, and to really look at it in a realistic and I think sincere manner, that you kind of bring everybody in and understand each of these stakeholders. And that's actually what make design thinking different from system thinking. It's like if you look at system thinking, you have all these different stakeholders, you dive in all their problems. Whereas when we have design thinking, so you focus on these few stakeholders and then you dive in there. And so it's like if you map everything using the system, like you map the systems and then really use the design thinking method to actually go into each network. So it's not just one, but you understand all, and then you build and then you find a way to kind of improve depending on what is the what are the points, like what are our objective of the project to begin with. So this is where I feel like it's like system thinking really enables us to understand all the different stakeholders, and design thinking really help us to actually understand each of the stakeholders and their relationships, their connections, and interactions, and that give us insights to the system on its own, and whether it's a healthy system or it's unhealthy, and you have to define this, of course, and then how to make it healthier. And yeah, so uh, that's the that's the gist that I have for that.
Okay. All right, thank you for the deep and thorough explanation on that question. Okay, we have one question from the audience. I think this coming from the student. Adib Aiman Azmi. Hi, Dr. Sarah. I'm industrial design student from UiTM Shah Alam. I got a few questions to ask, okay, about systematic design thinking. So the question is there any specific path to pursue in Malaysian university or overseas to further my studies to focus on this kind of path? So I think Aiman is interested to learn more about systematic design thinking. So he asked if he can further his studies in Malaysia or overseas that somehow focus on this approach.
So in specifically for the approach that I shared today by Naman, so one of the founder of the studio, Kristen Vanel, she's also a teacher in Antwerp University. So in part of the Faculty of Design in Antwerp University. So this is one place that is exploring this field. And of course, in Delft University of Technology, my colleagues are also working on this on a slightly. So it's also like so in Delft, it's also now under the Design for Sustainability group. They are looking on this area as well. So that's two direct connections that I know. But of course, to pursue in Malaysia University, probably Dr. Rosalam can give a better answer to that question, because I have to be, I'm not that aware.
Yes, Dr. Sarah, now, currently she's in Belgium, Brussels, but who knows the next coming year, if she happened to come down or you know like go back to Malaysia for good or something, and she's based in local university, maybe you can pursue your studies under her supervision.
That's definitely, and of course, like me myself, if you have any questions, you can send me an email. I think I'm not so sure. Like I will share my email in the chat later on,
Yeah.
or maybe I can write it now already. Yeah, so you can send me an email to ask or to discuss about your projects, just more on a informal way. And of course, we have the Green Design Malaysia Facebook group, so feel free to join us there. And there's like if you have any questions or discussion, it's also, I think, nice to bring more people in the discussions to kind of openly share this with everyone. So now I will send my email.
All right.
You
Okay.
can,
So Adi or all the other audience, if you want to ask a further question directly to Dr. Sarah, you can email her. So she's writing on the email. Okay. There is one not a question, maybe a statement. Okay. This is from Professor Luqman Chua. Okay. Professor Luqman Chua is actually a professor from Faculty of Engineering UPM, and he is actually an associate researcher in INTROP, Institute of Tropical Forestry and Forest Product, where I did my master's actually, Institute of
okay.
Tropical Forestry and Forest Product. Okay, and he mentioned about sometimes it is hard to balance the sustainability and cost in design. Consumers may not appreciate the value of sustainability with additional costs on top of the products by the designers. So, do you have any comments on this? I mean, it's not a really question, but he's just making a statement, which is quite true actually. Consumers may not appreciate the value of sustainability with additional cost, because when you have to add on the cost, people might not appreciate it because the items or the products, design or services will become more expensive or pricey.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's a it's really a challenge, but also a fact that the trends is like one of the trend is like when you talk about sustainability, it become like a more premium brand or premium line of products or services. So so I agree, of course, consumer may not appreciate the cost on top of the products, but it also depends on the different type of consumer. And this is where, in terms of sustainability, I think we had this one discussion where somebody asked me whether how does you get this like all these different certificate for sustainability, and it makes me realize that yeah, apart from like yeah, not just the certificate takes really a long time, and sometimes it's not that like it doesn't really translate back when you look at the cost the value of the cost and value of things. But what is really important is really the sustainable stories that you share, because people of course you have different groups of consumer, different groups of different segment of consumer, and sometimes it's important to actually strategically place your products within which area of consumer you want to target from. So I have to, yeah, there are some costs, that incurred cost when you talk about sustainability design, but it doesn't need to be that. So this is, I think for me, this is the challenge as a designer, where you need to find this, of course, not just in sustainability, in a lot of things. When you design, people talk about cost a lot, but I think there are also a few strategic points that you can add in your design process, where you leverage on sustainability to actually, for example, use waste in the system. So if you look at like one of the company in Malaysia, Harith Green Carpenter, for example, they use waste to actually produce products. So you find values in a lot of different, be a bit more creative in getting this cost. You don't look at one product high cost, but you look more on the collection or more on the system itself. So you have one product that is high cost, but then you also use the waste from that particular product to kind of create new product line, for example. And from my own experience, there are a lot of different way that sustainable approach somehow give kind of reduce our cost. So for one example was when I was working in Vietnam. So we work with a ceramic company. So in Vietnam, they are used to, I don't know, it's like a Chinese style of vases, for example. So they're pretty really detailed store, like detailed handwork. It's full of and it's like full pattern, like the whole area. And when we are designing for example, for the European market, they like more simplicity. So they don't really appreciate too much. They like the pattern, but really just one motif per vase, and you just need to draw one flower for just a motif. And we have been questioned by the companies, by the workers. They're not used to spend like 1/3 of their time to produce something, because they're so used to draw the whole vases. Then now they only need to draw one motif, which reduce a lot of production time. And of course, production times also in a way reduce the cost. So this is one way of like really looking at like reducing the cost in a bit more creative way. And for example, design for like sustainable design approach also include compact design. So when you design for compactness, you reduce the cost of distribution costs, for example. And when you look at reusing material, making things lighter, so you really start to question your design decision. Actually, like, do I need that many products to actually achieve this function? And this is where I at least for me as a designer, and I think a lot of other designers find this sorry, that's my coffee machine, find this as an interesting challenge to kind of find this balance. Like, and I think in any design project, it's not necessarily sustainability. Balancing this, like in terms of making production happy, bringing the consumer, making sure that you are on trend, is the things that designer have to learn to deal with as part of the trade. And I think adding sustainability is another interesting facet to it. And please explore more sustainable approaches. I have also a digital publication. I think I shared with I can share it later as well, where you can also have different strategies to implement in your design, in the design process.
Right. Prof. Lokman Chua, if you have any further question, or maybe we can do some additional discussions on that topic, you can always type in your question, or you can always turn on your camera. And then with regard to what have been asked by Prof. Lokman Chua, okay, from your presentation, I think I can see that you have mentioned about the importance to use the sustainable materials that we can find or grow locally. We have many local resources that that is available, abundance available in our country. And I've got the chance to actually work within the similar scope when I was doing my master's degree, that I diversified the use of locally produced material, precisely natural fiber from Kenaf, and it is meant for prosthetic application. So when I was conducting this research, I noticed there are some issues. There are many issues and challenges in introducing and using locally produced sustainable materials for even a small fabrication scale, because I was just doing sort of like a test on how the material can be fabricated into the prosthetic application. So it was really a small scale fabrication. Okay, and I believe in the bigger challenge could emerge. Okay, when we try to upscale or put it into bigger scale production or mass production or for commercialization. So my question is how systematic design thinking can support the innovation process for example, in understanding and including various stakeholders in the system to support the innovation process. So how can we actually use this systematic approach?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's really nice to kind of now discuss about the local sustainable material in Malaysia. Of course, Kenaf is one of a really interesting, but I think under interesting material, but it's a little bit under the radar among the industry. I'm not so sure, but I think there's a lot of research about Kenaf, and there's also a lot of push or a lot of support from the government as well when it comes to Kenaf agriculture. But I don't know how these are translated to the industry and of course to the market. And yeah, so just to continue with a little bit of a story about Kenaf as well. For myself, I learned, or I come to know about Kenaf in 2009 when I went to Maha as part of my research work for the local playground company. And yeah, I learned about this amazing product, amazing things like the grass that grows within 4 or 5 months in Malaysia is really and there's so many values that it offer. And I think I remember that they are building also something like a fiberglass, fiber composite material from Knaf. And of course the question like what happened to this particular product. And I think when you think about system, we can start small. So what does a system means? It's really about something that runs a course on its own, like a system that are driven by something. So we have to look at, this is why people start to look at circular economy, because the circularity is what the system that make it into loops, what make it run on its own. And yeah, so when you talk about how the systemic design approach can improve the development of Knaf as a sustainable material in Malaysia, is really to look at, first, I know, at least from my personal experience, that we have the producer, the agriculture, and even the climate and the capacity to actually plant and produce this as an agricultural produce. And then we have research that find different applications of this, I believe, as part of what Dr. Rosalam has done in his master as well. So the question next is, how does this how does the industry, are there any local industry that is processing this particular produce and turn it into a material to be used either in construction, in furniture, for example. So these are like, or for medical grade products. So it's because you really need to build on the system, and this is where I kind of find it's important to have a support from the policymakers as well, because you need to have a focus on one system and then try to make it work. And then once the system works, you have the chance to scale up, or to also create interest from other stakeholders, so from other markets. So I just give an example, like say the Knaf, for example, you can make a fiber composite board really easily, and it's sustainable, because any wood polymer composite, we can reuse it. And then you need to have a company that produce it first, manufacturers that actually buy this from the farmers, and then process this to be used by designers and by companies. And of course, the designer themselves have to be taught about this material and its value and how they can translate it to the market. Because if the market didn't really need this, because it's not that they don't need it, they don't know about it yet. You know, so this is when you talk about innovation, you're talking about sometimes market that don't even know what they need. But how do we introduce this? Of course, you have a lot of different ways to introduce this, by having a group of people that work together to kind of push it out into the market, make a lot of promotion around it. And this is where the system, understanding the system and the lack of a system, for example, in this situation, a lack of a system that need to be built. And to build this like the ecosystem around a material needs a lot of support to start with. So when I say support, it's really funding, either from the industry, or from the government, or from other organization. And this is where I think, from my opinion, university play a role, because university has this capacity to explore things without taking a big of a risk like a company would. You know, like you can have students making different designs, and in this way work with existing manufacturer to kind of start to play around with this. So the manufacturer take this as their way of like CSR, by offering like students a placement for students, and students will actually share this new research or new material with them and see whether it can be started, it can be rolled slowly into the market, for example. And it's not an easy process if you want this to happen naturally, because as we know, the system, like they don't talk to each other, or they are connected, but they don't really are not usually aware of each other. So university have been working on this material, but are any manufacturers, local Malaysian manufacturers, knew about these products? And of course, you have to look beyond the country as well. Like, is it able to be exported? are other countries that have been exporting and using this material in their industry already. Like you can see Vietnam, for example, they're also one of the big producer, but I actually don't know yet what kind of products or what kind of things that they use, but mainly I think for paper. So these are the things that we can understand the system, but we can also build a system around it. And we start with a small, at least from my view, is like it's okay to be small as long as it runs on its own, rather than like, you know, you have a lot of aid, but then the problem with like getting funding is like when the fund ends, what happened to the project? So that's always the things that we try to think of the sustainability of the project. So to think about this, you need to understand the system and build a system that works. So I think it's probably a research on its own to how we can nurture such system to develop such system.
To show that we actually have abundance availability of the local potentially sustainable material like kenaf itself, we have this one special board meant for it. We have this Lembaga Kenaf and Tembakau Malaysia, or the national the National Tobacco and Kenaf board. Okay, we have that specific board meant for that specific commodities actually. And then going back to what we have mentioned just now about the role of university, of course, I mean, in making sure that research outcomes could be benefited by the people at large, for example, we need to work hand in hand with all the stakeholders who involved directly and indirectly in introducing and implementing the sustainable design to our society, right? So the concept of maybe quintuple helix innovation model that focuses on the interactions among 5 key elements of society: academia, industry, government, and culture, and the environment with respect to the harnessing knowledge to promote social, political, and economic development. So in this case, before we go too much ahead, maybe we can talk within the scope of university or academia first. Okay, and just now you have mentioned about the role of university, in particular to the perspective of sustainable design approach. What do you think the role of university or higher institution, especially design school, that is served to become the catalyst or to accelerate and stimulate the innovation within the scope of sustainability? What can we do actually? I mean, we as the design researchers, we as educators, we as the practitioners, what can we actually do in making sure that this could happen?
I think when we talk about systemic design thinking, what university can do is really to facilitate these different stakeholders, because I think it's fairly interesting that people start to think about why like there's so many knowledge that you can acquire now, like, you know, not like through YouTube you can like pretty much learn everything there. And with I think we had more than one discussion about this, like, yeah, why at one point, why do you think university will be important? And this is actually a real question, because you start to think like, what are the values that university are offering to the society, to the industry, to the people? And I think, at least for my, like, this is just my own opinion, that I think what is interesting about university, and also based on my experience as well, is university has the space and the capacity to bring people in. Like, it don't just need to be the students. You can bring kindergarten kids. You can bring a lot of different stakeholders in the environment, and start to share and start to learn from each other. Like, not just about the specific courses, the specific programs, but really about learning from the people. And when you talk about the system, is because there's a lot of stakeholders in the system that are not interacting with each other, because that's just how the nature of things. Manufacturer will keep on manufacturing, designer will keep on designing based on the project that they receive, like, even though they have some ideas, some aspiration, but we still need to pay our bills. So we work on what is given to us, which is actually what the company get, like what the company think the consumer need, and the consumer will just keep on buying the things that they are buying, because this is how they things how things are, or yeah. So there's a lot of questions on how we do things or why we do it. And I think design, especially design schools, has an interesting place where you kind of envision what is the future of living, like how do we live in the future, and then from such an how to say such project, then you start to kind of questions all these people and bring and I think university can bring all these people in, or you bring and ask about all this aspiration, like, oh, why do you buy this, like, do you think this is important? And then most of the time people will say like, yeah, I never really think about this is just how I do things, and they wouldn't really want to jump in directly, for of course, like they don't want to just like, okay, I will just change the whole system, I'll change my businesses because I will follow what is sustainable from this research. They won't do that. But then you start small by introducing this to them, like, can we start just a small project with our students, or small projects that benefit both. So it's like also a win-win situation is really important, because a lot of times people think, yeah, they are students, they just bring them in because they have to do their industrial training, for example. And I think those mindset need to be changed. Like we need to see like, okay, we have these smart, bright, new generations, what are the value that they can offer to the community already? Like they don't need to graduate, we don't need to graduate to be able to share our values to the community. Like when they are still studying, what are the things that we can actually offer to the company? And I take this as an example of a project that I work with, I coach for in TU Delft, which is the Joint Master Project. So the Joint Master Project is really about bringing life projects into like, so the system is, so there are like 5 group students of 5 from different backgrounds. So it's like in TU Delft, they have strategic product design, design for interaction, and product integration. And this group, either the student can find their own projects, but also the teachers and the faculty look for projects as well. And I was working with this guy who, Henk Kalpers, he's one of the pioneers in this project. And then I asked him, how did you do this? Like they have Philips, they have BMW, they have a lot of big companies that is coming asking to be part of the project. So one thing was, companies need to be aware that this is a student project, so they have like students, they have to follow a certain like students need to follow a certain requirement for their courses, like the things that they need to do. But at the same time, this company also know what they need. They want to explore new innovation things, they want to explore new consumer base, and having this student doing their work for them actually benefit them, because they don't have to hire directly like a professional yet, unless this field has been verified. And of course, this company have to pay a certain amount of fees to the university themselves. So that's the thing about doing things for free. Usually it's not really valuable, because then the company don't think really carefully what they want. Like, it's free, I'll take it. But if I have to pay 3,000 ringgit, for example, for a project, which is minimal for a company, for a business, well, there's also like, okay, and then I will pay more attention to it, because I've paid these people to do some work, and it's not as high as the normal professional designer fees, because this is of course done by the students. And for me as a design as a coach for such a project, it gives me a different way of working with the students, that I really need to understand the company as well myself, link with the supervisor from the company to really understand them, and of course sharing the objective together. So when I talk to Hank, like how do they start, is like, oh, of course, like in the first year they really have to find like really go to companies, but of course nobody want to give projects to students, of course through network, like, yeah, so it takes time to build the confidence, to receive confidence from the industry. But then you need to start somewhere, that like, and of course, because you wanted to also build this kind of confidence, the teachers themselves need to be sure that they are good project managers, they know the trends, they are making sure that the students are offering good values to the companies as well. So these are like the things that I think universities can do to kind of really make it like make things lively, beyond beyond just giving a talk and sharing the knowledge that we have, but I think the next step is really implementing the knowledge that we have, and it can be scary even for myself. I talk a lot about all these different things, but every time I have to do a co-creation session, it's still you still have to prepare yourself, go into a new field, learn about new people, new culture, and you make you on your toes all the time. But I think over time, this is also what the students have to deal with, and as a teacher, then it makes you a bit more empathetic, as well as the struggles that new designer have to face in dealing with clients, in convincing clients that your design or your solutions is what they need, and of course also managing rejection, because you have to be aware not all not all projects will be successful. You have projects that just doesn't work, or projects that have difficult people to work with. And I think through this experience with the students, you are preparing the student better to actually deal in the industry on their own. And yeah, so that's actually what I think university can really be a catalyst to kind of nurture innovation when there's not a lot of support from the policymakers, for example, as yet. But of course, this is always so if you are successful, people will look at what you're doing, and this is when, if one project is good, then you have more investors coming in, and of course you probably receive more support then. And so this is also part of like why marketing and sharing what we do is really important as well. So yeah, sorry for the long talk, but I hope I answered the question.
You have successfully answered the question, of course. I do not see any more questions from the chat room. But to the audience, if you have any further questions, you can always write in your question, or you can always turn on your camera and your mic. Okay, there's something from Dr. Zaki. Dr. Zaki Jafar. He said he would like to propose, he would like to propose a forum in the near future on this issue, and of course, Dr. Sarah should be one of the panels, of course. And he added, I think the pedagogy in our education and in our design education and other fields too need to respond to the circular design and the systematic design trend. Okay, I think we don't have any more further question from the audience, or should we wait for a few more minutes? Yeah, there is one comment as well from Dr. Mastura. Thank you, Dr. Sarah, for the eye-opening and profound topic presented today. I would like to know, okay, your opinion regarding the potential of sustainable design related activities such as upcycling and green design movement in Malaysia. Maybe you can comment on that.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Masura. So to look again as our theme today, like when we talk about system of upcycling, there's a lot of challenges when we think about recycling, like upcycling or reusing, repurposing items is really the issue falls, if you look at the system, is really the collection part. Like, you know, you can do a lot when you have a lot of masks. You can do a lot when you have a lot of bottles. But how do we collect this? So this is the service that needed to kind of bring, so you have the waste from the consumer, from the citizens, and then everything is put in a bin, and then it's thrown to the waste management system. And then this sorting, like the part of sorting things out and like making sure it's being upcycled or proposed, it's actually a big task. And what people, like what the previous conventional way of dealing this, we just put everything, we burn it, incinerate them. And when you talk about upcycling, I think the key to really like doing this is really to look at the system of collecting from the user themselves. So for example, you have they have a lot of so things that things that we can upcycle, for example, clothing. So how do you collect clothing? And of course, when you talk about making, like manufacturing, remanufacturing clothing into different fibers, then you need to do a lot of sorting. So sorting type of, so like either it's cotton or it's a mixed polyester. So that is actually the potential when we want to tap into this business is, I would say it's not really about what we can upcycle, but really what kind of material we can collect to enable us to mass produce or like upcycle in a industrial manner. For example, like if you want to collect, we have now maybe a system that collect bottles, but what kind of bottles? Like only how to say, only just a colored bottle, and then you can do something with it. So this is like, I think, the design movement, the services that is needed around collecting and sorting waste. And I have to say, I learned to also not to use like waste, because I think this is actually a new resources that we can work on. And when you start to think like you collecting resources from the household, like how do you collect these resources from the household? Just for a simple upcycling project is use cooking oil, where you can upcycle and turn it into other like soap or other different products. And it's really about upcycling, like collecting this material and then bringing that into production plant. And I think in Malaysia there's a lot of green design movements already. Like the one that I'm aware of is like eco brick. For example, they teach people how to make bricks, eco bricks. So basically filling the plastic bottle with small plastic to reach a certain weight, and then you use it as a brick in the construction or in your garden, for example. So this is my opinion. When you think about like upcycling, repurposing, like the one bottleneck you need to focus on is really about collecting and sorting and collecting the right material to be processed. Because to be honest, technology to process all these different materials is already there. You have we can transform plastic to fabric. We can use we can, like, our current technology allow us to do a lot of things with use resources like fabric. But our problem is always about sorting and collecting. And if we can kind of have this system, and this system of course doesn't just arise on its own, because we need to make sure that user, like for example household, know how to sort, and you don't ask them to sort all 5 or 20 37, for example, sort things to sort if you're living in Japan, but start sorting something small like paper and plastic only, and the other things you throw it as normal. So it's kind of like really building the system step by step, and having a good system that runs on its own is better than having like a big ideas that doesn't really work at all but stops halfway. So that's always my vision when I work on things. Like, it's okay to start small, but as long as it work when and if you want to start big, of course you have to know that you need more resources, you need more time, you need more funding. And if you have that, by all means please do it. But if you don't, if we don't have it, then we kind of learn to use what we have and move step by step towards green design, like towards a more sustainable Malaysia.
Yeah, I think I would pretty much agree with that. The problems or the issues of collecting and sorting the waste. Okay? Because when you can imagine how nice our waste the waste management system in Malaysia, you know, as compared to the overseas. You know, I got the chance to actually live in Europe as well. I was in Italy, and when we can see how systematic the people are. I mean, they sort, or they sort of like do the sortings of the waste from the domestic, from the recyclable materials and non-recyclable materials. I mean, it started from the house, right? And then they think that if we were to do sort of like the sustainable approach perspective in the bigger place in Malaysia, we have to somehow start in where we live, right? And that is like a long way to go in Malaysia, because we haven't even had that kind of a waste management as yet. Okay, it's a long way to go, but of course it's about the mindset of the people. If we can somehow put it into the mindset, we can somehow change the perception of people how important it is, then maybe we can do something like that in the future as well. Yeah. So I don't see any more questions from the audience, okay, as yet, and it's 5:10 p.m. now. Okay. Yeah, okay. There is additional comment from the Mastura. Thank you for the input. I hope the similar positive attitude and acceptance by our community to support the systematic thinking of sustainable designing. Start small, be DIY, maker, and keep on moving. Yeah. Okay. From Prof. Lokman Chua, thank you, Dr. Sarah. Very interesting talk. From Farid Zain, thank you, Sarah. Very impressive sharing all this as well. So I think, yeah, it's about time now, right? What time is it now in Brussels?
Now it's just only 11,
Yeah, it's
11
your
10
lunchtime.
here. So
And it's
it's a
summer,
good time for me.
and it's summer there, right?
Yes, it's still summer
Yeah.
now. So that's why I'm in my baju kedah, my summer wear.
Okay, great. Okay, since we don't have any further questions from the audience, I think it would be nice if we can do maybe a closing remarks to close our session today.
Yes, first of all, of course, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words and also for spending almost 2 hours here with me and Dr. Rosalam to discuss about systemic design thinking in design for sustainability. And of course, I think I would just like to make a small proposal of starting a small system. Like when we wanted to start a small system, really look at not, you don't have to look at the bigger state, but first look at our household, what is the system there, what we can improve, and then look at our community, like just having a good taman, like activity within your, like people in your taman is already good. I think it is a good start to just start sorting something from, I think every taman now has their own WhatsApp group. So it's not so difficult to ask people to collect the mask and then put them in a waste and then wait it out for like a certain period of time and then and do a collecting of masks because we have that a lot. We have been using that a lot, and it's kind of like I think initiative that designers or anybody can start small and start to build. Like, okay, if I have this material, what can I do with it? What where I can send it? And yeah, so we start small and then we scale up. So that's the most like the agile, the lean innovation method. So that's how I would kind of conclude this talk today because I think in Malaysia we really have a lot of a good grassroots movement. People are willing to do the work. People are willing to do things themselves. People help each other a lot when there's like when there's issue and also like when we are thinking about building a better Malaysia together. And of course, I think people are willing to come aboard and share the load. So yeah, that's my final thoughts is that, and feel free to connect with me for any discussions or any points if you have any further questions or further references that you need that I did not share in this that I mentioned but did not share in detail in this presentation. So feel free to contact me. And yes, and lastly, thank you, Faculty of Design and Architecture UPM for having me today. And yeah, thank you for the co-host, like the moderator of the day, and also for everybody's here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dr. Saraswin, for that wonderful session. And again, if you have any further questions to ask, anything at all, maybe business proposals or anything to do with that, you can always connect to Dr. Saraswin with the given email address. Connect, CONNECT @hin-studio.com, and then she also shared the link to her studio works, right? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so this is like a I collected a lot of different sustainable strategies across over time, and I just put them in a draft publication for now. I hope to further include details of each strategies next time. So that's I think I just
Sort of
saw.
like a portfolio or something.
Yeah, so Dr. Mastura mentioned about looking to read my paper. So hopefully you can take a look on this publication. And because I can't do this myself, because there's a lot of strategies that we need to include, there's like 80 strategies. So I'm also looking forward for any interesting collaborators, and yeah, from there we can talk about the details further.
All right, thank you so much. So with that, I think it's almost the end of the session. It's actually the end of the session already. Okay, thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us, joining our session with Dr. Sarah Suim. And I think just before we end, I think can we take a photo together? If you may, you can turn on the camera and then you can have a snapshot of the photo.